Alright YouTube, I thought I'd make a video about the silent majority. Not the silent majority of conservative Americans who propelled Nixon to the nomination and the presidency, but a different silent majority which most people don't even know exists in this country, in other parts of the Christian world, the Muslim world, and something that I've experienced myself, having spoken with thousands and thousands of Christians and Muslims and Hindus and so forth, that there's a silent majority in these religious groups that aren't technically part of these religious groups. They've done studies before, surveys and so forth of priests and ministers across different religions, and they found, for instance, a study showed 1 in 6 Dutch ministers, the Dutch Protestant ministers, they were actually atheists. They didn't even believe in the God that they were teaching about. I saw a study once that suggested that up to 20% of Catholic priests were actually atheist or agnostic and weren't sure about the existence of their God and or explicitly didn't believe in that God. I think the reason for this is that when you have an organized religion organized around a church structure, a very literal physical structure or an organizational network, you have individuals who are raised in that religion. They retain the philosophical beliefs of that religion. Someone who's, raised Catholic, raised Protestant, raised Muslim, or so forth. They retain that philosophical belief of that specific version of right and wrong. They retain the social network that comes with that community. For instance, an all-Italian neighborhood in New York City where everyone's Catholic, well, they're going to carry that for the rest of their life, probably be part of that network for the rest of their life as well. However, and there is some lightning right now and some thunder, so, you might hear some cracking thunder here. The thing is this: if levels of disbelief in a deity, the specific deity of a religion, are that high in the clergy of that religion, 15, 20, maybe even a quarter of all the people in the clergy, what would the rate be for the laity? You'd think it would be higher. You'd think that the people who are investing years and years of their life in teaching about that religion would be more likely to take it more seriously than the laity that simply goes to church, plays bingo or whatever. I could point out at least half a dozen fire and brimstone evangelist sorts that I personally know for a fact are not actually believers in those gods, or they do so on a merely deistic level, and their charades are primarily to make money, to entertain people, or to be part of that cohesive church community. I would point out Bob Larson, who took his satanic and heavy metal guests out for drinks after the show, it is said, and lavished praise upon them and made jokes about how people actually believed that he was a fire and brimstone exorcist. So you've got this phenomenon. So the silent majority in the United States, there are those who explicitly don't believe in God, which is rising quickly. The fastest growing religious group on earth is non-religion. I've pointed that out before. Wicca is faster in terms of a percentage, but in terms of absolute numbers, non-belief is definitely the world's fastest growing religious group, if you can call it a religious group. It's more of an anti-religious group. I would point out that along with the avowed atheists and agnostics, and along with a great number of deists who don't really take their beliefs seriously, there are those who consider themselves Christian or Muslim or Jewish or whatnot, and yet they don't actually practice the religion literally. They may, for instance, a Christian may pray and read the Bible but not really believe in the God, sort of do it for cultural reasons. They may believe in the God, but they don't really read the Bible or go to church. They may go to church only as a community sort of thing, and when they go home, they do what every other American does, and they don't really believe in any of that stuff that the church teaches. They go there to be part of the community because it's comforting to people. It builds up a community structure, and in this way, I think churches, in a way, are a positive force in the United States because they hold communities together. Sometimes for bad reasons, such as, let's all go protest gay marriage or whatever. Other times they hold it together for good in times of grieving or whatever. But the silent majority of the world's population are a bunch of atheists and agnostics. And studies have shown time and time again, a great number of the Christians, particularly in the Western world, they're certainly not fundamentalists, they're not even moderate Christians, they're extremely liberal deists and agnostics, some of them outright atheists. So that's the silent majority in the Western world today, that the majority of the people who claim to be Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, and so forth, are not actually Christians, Muslims, Jews, or Hindus. They are atheists, agnostics, and non-literalist liberal deists who predominantly use the church's social structure for their own comfort and gain. That being said, we've already seen the death of religion in the United States. For instance, more than half of the population supports gay marriage. If you read the Bible, it's rather explicit that gay marriage would be prohibited because, of course, there are verses in the Bible that teach that sodomy and all homosexual arrangements are explicitly abominations against God. So you've got to assume that because 3/4 of the United States is supposedly Christian, yet half of the United States proposes that gay marriage is a good idea, that there's a large chunk of Christians in the country that do not interpret the Bible literally, and we can see that this is the case across many cultures. I've met people before who refer to themselves as Muslims on chat sites or whatever. When you press them further, you realize they're not Muslims. They go to the mosque to be part of a social structure. They refer to themselves as Muslims because their family is Islamic, because their friends are Islamic. Most of the people that are around them that are Islamic aren't even Muslims. They're social Muslims who may go to the mosque, may not, may pray, may not even believe in Allah. They do it for cultural and social reasons. I've met many, many Christians who are the same way. Because in order to take a religion and be serious about it, you have to adhere to a specific dogmatic set of commands that comes down either from the God or from some divinely inspired prophet, something which many adherents of all world religions do not actually do. I would say the same is true about Satanism to an extent. Here's an admission about Satanism. Most professing Satanists do not actually literally interpret the Satanic Bible. This is whether it's the Church of Satan, independent Satanists, or whatever. They don't believe in Satan, certainly, because Satanism is an atheistic philosophy. The majority of Satanists do not adhere to the satanic guidelines of the Satanic Bible, nor to any other specific doctrine. They give themselves that label because, number one, they agree with some of the fundamental beliefs of Satanism. Not necessarily most of them, maybe only a few, one or two. They like the community, and they like the purpose. It gives them a sense of belonging and community because man is a social being. Mankind thrives off of socializing. There are exceptions, of course. There are those, I would argue, that Satanists, which merely label themselves as Satanists to be part of a satanic community, are essentially the opposite of Satanism, because Satanism stresses independence. It would be a loose confederation rather than a federal sort of system whereby you have the high priests commanding people, or you have groups democratically deciding what to do. In reality, it should be a more anarchic system than that, whereby people essentially write their own script and do their own thing. That would be what I would consider proper Satanism. And indeed, what would be considered proper Satanism, according to the people who actually founded it. The idea of paying $200 for the little red card sort of goes against the grain of what, ironically, the Church of Satan actually stresses. So most Christians and Muslims and all other religious groups that can be said to be theistic and can be said to be willing to put themselves forward to convert others. I will accept the groups, make an exception for groups which are either not necessarily theistic, sort of more philosophical like most Buddhists, or who don't show a real active interest in converting others. There are certain religious groups, they don't care if you convert to their religion. You won't find any fundamentalist members because that's not part of the religious teaching. Those groups are accepted from this system because they're all basically liberal members. But as for most Christians, most Jews, most Muslims, and most Hindus at least, the majority of the people within these religious faiths either actively attempt to convert others or passively attempt to convert others, either by directly saying you will go to hell if you don't, blank, you will suffer if you don't, blank, Jesus said, blank, or on the other side, the passive side, which would be more the Hindus or some Jews generally, well, our way is best because blank. Our philosophy makes sense because blank. These are the arguments that they make. These groups differentiate in terms of how they get others to join their group, but they still attempt to make that happen. However, most of the members of those faiths don't care if you convert. Most Christians do not care if you convert to Christianity. They may believe in hell and heaven. Ironically, they take a more Buddhistic view of it, as in, you are a good person, you go to heaven, you are a bad person, you go to hell. They take up almost a neo-Buddhistic stance on how heaven and hell are determined and structured than they do actually literalistically taking the Bible and saying, those who profess openly Jesus is Lord, go to heaven. Those who do not, which means whether they're virtuous or not, anyone who's not a specific Christian, goes to hell. You will find many more liberals and deists in most world religions than you will fundamentalists. Ironically, and as a parting message, I wouldn't consider fundamentalist Christians Christians either. They use the Christian name without playing the Christian game, because essentially what they spend most of their time doing is the opposite of what the Bible teaches, by making themselves judge, jury, and executioner, and spending their time whining about gay marriage or making political statements. And that is essentially what they do. They don't really literalistically follow Christ. They sort of ignore Jesus' teachings about mercy and forgiveness, which is the basis for Christianity, and spend most of their time ranting about philosophy and about politics. So the silent majority in the world is non-belief, and it is a fast-growing group, because as the internet makes it more acceptable to be a non-believer in whatever religion is the majority in your country, because it connects you to the wider network of atheists or agnostics or deists, as that slowly progresses over time, you will see more and more people converting to these groups away from the dominant religion of their homeland. We see it already, of course, from 1990 to 2001. Non-belief more than doubled in size in the United States, while most religions did not. It doubled from, I can't remember the exact numbers, it's up around 24 million people now, up from maybe 8 or 9 million in the 1990s. And this is in fact going to continue, and I believe personally it will pick up pace as we capitalize on the internet more and more. So that's my message: silent majority, non-belief. Peace out.